Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our Thales Press webinar on writing, entitled Begin at the Beginning, which is focusing on the skills, the strategies, and the resources that teachers need to teach students at the junior high level how to become more competent and capable writers. I'm joined here by Elizabeth Jetton.
Good morning.
Who's a longtime Trivium teacher at Thales Academy Apex, as well as a content expert for Thales Press. So for some of the logic and rhetoric books that we've been assembling over the past few years, Elizabeth has been editing and writing a lot of the content in those books. And we're overjoyed to have her expertise here on our webinar. For anyone who does not know me, my name is Winston Brady, and I'm the Director of Curriculum at Thales Academy, as well as the Director of Thales Press. And the goal of these webinars is to try to create a space where students and teachers can share ideas that make learning a more joyful and engaging experience. As far as the logistics, we make these recordings available via our Thales Press YouTube channel, as well as a podcast that we manage entitled Developing Classical Thinkers. Elizabeth is going to take over the webinar from here on in, and Q&A is going to follow after the presentation. But if there's anything that we don't cover, feel free to email either myself or Elizabeth. We'd be more than happy to talk through anything and everything that comes to classical education and the teaching of writing. So Elizabeth, I turn it over to you. Thank you so much for your time, and look forward to the great insights that you're going to share with us.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. One of the great people that we like to focus on when talking about character and rhetoric and writing and speaking is Quintilian, who talked about who the perfect orator was, is not just someone who can speak and communicate and write well, but was also a person of great virtue. So we like to cultivate in our students not just being able to make a good argument and write well, but to do so with the goal of what is right in mind. Some of the challenges that I have faced, and I assume other people have faced as well, that I'm going to focus on today are that it is very difficult to have enough time to grade essays. They take a lot more time than grading a multiple choice test. So managing that time, how to explain to a student how to improve. It's sometimes difficult to create an objective way to help them improve something. It's easier for us to tell that it's not quite right or not the best way to say something, but how to explain to them how to improve without just telling them what to do, without just giving them new words, for instance. Creating objective revision guidelines, so things that they can concretely see what they need to fix, and then how to grade more objectively so that it's both fair and easier for you to figure out how to give each student a grade for a writing assignment. And then if there are other challenges that you have faced that you want any advice or insight about, feel free to ask those at the end or email myself or Mr. Brady. So these are the things I'm going to be walking through today. One is, what should we expect a middle schooler to be able to do in their writing? Obviously, what they should be able to do is a little different from a high school student and what we expect from them. Next, we'll talk about how to teach those skills, how to manage your time when grading, and then a few resources that I will share with you that I've used over the years. These are some of the things that seem to be good universal skills for a younger student to make sure they are doing before they reach high school. Making sure they know what a thesis statement is and how to write a good, clear one. It doesn't need to sound extraordinary. It needs to convey what they are trying to argue and how they're going to argue it. It needs to be well organized. It needs to use correct grammar. And then in regards to how the essay sounds, making sure their sentence structures are varied so it doesn't sound very repetitive throughout the essay, and making sure they're using good, strong vocabulary words, knowing when and where to use first, second, and third person, so the difference between those points of view, and then when it's appropriate to use each one. And I always emphasize quality over quantity when it comes to writing, especially in middle school. It is better for them to be able to write a really, really good 3-paragraph essay than a 5-page paper. We can always work on them with coming up with more ideas later that helps lengthen their essays. But in middle school, it's best to focus on just writing well. And then as they improve, we can expect more from them. We can add on more paragraphs. We can increase the length of each paragraph once they know what to do and how to do it well. One of the best ways to teach our students what a good essay looks like is to model those. I find that these make great Socratic seminars. We'll take an essay or we'll take an article and we'll read through it, a different type of article, usually for each Socratic seminar that we do. For example, a persuasive article or a descriptive story or an expository essay. And we read through it and talk specifically about how they did in their writing. Was it hard to follow or was it easy to follow? How well organized was it? Was it persuasive? What helped it be persuasive? And that helps them see that a persuasive article has maybe these strong descriptive vocabulary words versus reading a persuasive essay that was not as convincing, may have not used the same vocabulary words, or it didn't have the same research in it. So comparing a good and a bad persuasive article together can be very helpful for them to see exactly how to improve their own writing. So then as we end our Socratic seminar, usually we come up with a list of what they should work on when they write their upcoming essay. So using those as discussions and having good examples really helps them see how to improve their own writing. Just like being a good reader helps a student to find good vocabulary words and use good grammar from all the practice reading. Reading particular essays and articles will help them write their own essays and articles better. So finding good, high quality essays to use as examples are a great place to start. These are some of the resources that we use. We have the Hake curriculum, which is what we use for middle school. For 6th and 7th grade. Their writing workbooks do a great job of breaking down the stages of writing an essay into very achievable elements. So it starts by simply writing a sentence. It starts as basic as that for students that come in that don't have as much writing experience. Maybe they went to a different elementary school. They did not focus on writing. So it breaks it down, writing a good sentence, writing a good thesis statement, writing a good topic sentence, how to add that into a paragraph, different types of evidence you can use. You can use examples or research or personal experience. And it breaks it down paragraph by paragraph and then ultimately adds it all together to write it into an entire essay. So that breaks it down very nicely for them. They work through it like that. The traits of writing curriculum is how I often teach objectively how students can improve their writing. It provides rubrics. I adapt them to our assignments. It provides nice checklists for them. There are 6 traits of writing. They call it 6 traits of writing, or you might see 6 traits of writing plus 1. They focus on ideas as one of those traits, organization, voice, sentence fluency, word choice, and conventions. And I'll talk more about grading in just a minute. The Institute of Excellence in Writing also has a resource notebook for students that can be very beneficial. It is very objective in its requirements. For instance, it tells them to add specific words like because, or a dependent clause using which or since. And then we have our research and writing curriculum that provides various lessons and primary sources to help students improve their writing. Okay. So when you are starting out a new assignment, you are trying to teach them something related to writing, it is important to practice each element individually before you add it as a grade on an assignment. So start one at a time, writing a good thesis statement. If they don't have a good thesis statement, that's going to be very difficult to write the rest of their essay. So I always have them write their thesis statement first, and then I grade their thesis statement, make sure it follows the directions, make sure it's going to make a good argument, and it follows all the directions of whatever the prompt was that they're writing on. Then we can add in something like using strong verbs or writing complex sentences. And each of those would be their own lesson that we would go over in class, what that means, how to work it into their writing. That Traits of Writing curriculum has some great resources in it. The one that you may have just seen on the previous screen, the screenshot there, is specifically for middle school, which is nice. You can also turn these into great group assignments. They can work on taking a generic paragraph and adding in strong verbs, for instance, or taking a poor thesis statement and revising it to make it into a strong thesis statement. Research and writing. It is important that they are reading and analyzing famous and significant authors and their works so that we can imitate those great examples. So using Aristotle, Adam Smith, famous speeches like from Martin Luther King, we can give them great examples of great authors and speakers from the past. Quintilian always talked about memorizing speeches of these famous orators as a way to improve our own speeches. So by seeing what great rhetorical devices are in a famous speech, the students then hear these great examples and naturally work them into their writing. It just helps them overall improve without even realizing necessarily that they're improving just by seeing great examples. So I have provided a few of my sample assignments. I've got some screenshots coming up in just a second, and there's some links there. Those documents are also in the Google Drive folder that Winston put in the chat a few minutes ago. But these are some ideas for different assignments to break down each element individually before you ever write it into a whole essay. For example, giving them just a topic and practice writing thesis statements. Not everything needs to turn into a whole essay. So giving them a variety of topics, create a thesis statement for each of these topics is a great way to practice writing those theses. Taking a very simple sentence like dog ran around the yard and then improving it by adding more detail to it, or using different sentence starters, like starting with participles or a dependent clause, things like that, or taking, again, a simple sentence and using much stronger vocabulary, finding out how to use a thesaurus and substituting in synonyms for weaker verbs and using stronger verbs, or adding in good quality adjectives to make their writing more descriptive. So those are some ways to break it down into assignments that don't have to be essays. So they can improve their writing for their essays before they ever start actually writing a full-length essay. Here are some screenshots of those sample assignments I was just mentioning. So on this one, we are practicing sentence fluency, which one of those traits of writing that curriculum talks about. They work on starting their sentences in different ways, so they don't all start with the subject of their sentence. So I give them a very simple sentence and give them directions to start it with a different type of sentence starter. That Institute for Excellence in Writing teaches this same element. They give them each number, so the students go through and number their sentences, and it helps them know that they haven't used the same one over and over again. A lot of students go through their writing and realize that most of their sentences start with the subject portion of their sentence. So this helps them make inverted sentences or starting with dependent clauses and things like that to make their writing more fluid and not sound so choppy by extending out each of these simple sentences. So I tell them they can add information to the sentence. They can add more details than are apparent in the sentence. They just can't get rid of anything. So for example, in A, the cat quickly chased the mouse around the house. The cat still has to be chasing the mouse around the house, but they can add other elements into that sentence in order to improve it or make it more detailed. That's something that the students also need reminders about when they're improving their essay, is they're always asking, is it okay if I change this? Because they're afraid they've turned in a rough draft already. They're afraid of adding more to it. So I always remind them, you can always add more detail to your sentences. You're not going to be able to take a sentence that starts which is just one simple sentence, and add in a because into that sentence without adding in more information to the sentence. So reminding them that the whole point of adding these elements into their sentences is to add more information to their sentence. We think about the why, and that's what allows us to add the because. So you add because along with a whole nother piece of information to explain it. So making sure they're not afraid to add more detail to their sentences after they've written their initial sentences down in an essay, for instance. So this is one sample assignment that I use to teach sentence fluency. Here's just a handout that I've created to teach them what sentence fluency is, and it gives them different ways of improving it. So one way they can improve their sentence fluency is by combining two short, choppy sentences, by putting a conjunction, a coordinate conjunction, or a subordinate conjunction between them, or starting one with a subordinate conjunction and adding the other afterwards. So I give them an example where they had two short sentences there at the bottom, and they revised it in two different ways. You can improve sentence fluency in a few different ways there. This goes on to talk about sentence beginnings and how to come up with ideas of what to write, answering questions like how, when, where, and why, and adding that on to what they may have initially written as a very basic paragraph or a basic essay. This is how they can improve that essay, by answering these questions. So making sure your assignments are detailed. I'm talking here more specifically when you're ready to assign an essay. Making sure the prompt is clear is essential to start with. If the students are confused about what the prompt is asking, they won't have time to focus on how to answer the question. They'll be still focusing on what to say. Then making sure the guidelines are very specific. I know some people don't always like to put down how many sentences each paragraph is, but it is important in middle school to give them that foundation of what a paragraph looks like. When they get to high school and beyond, then hopefully they've had enough practice seeing the appropriate length of a paragraph. But we need to be more structured when they're middle schoolers. They don't know what is enough information. So usually I give them a range. What a paragraph shouldn't be less than 4 sentences or more than 7 or 8. And then as they turn in rough drafts, I give them specific feedback about whether they need to add on to this paragraph or take away from a paragraph or split it into 2 paragraphs. But giving them a place to start is really important. You can also do a word count. That can be helpful, but you also have to make sure they're not just adding in a bunch of words that they don't really need to make their sentences or essay longer. So I like doing sentences, or you could do character count, so they're not simply adding in a bunch of short little words. And then how they will be graded. Usually I start out with just 1 or 2 requirements and then add on to that. So for each assignment, they should know exactly how they're going to be graded. I always have ideas as one of those categories because they need to have good ideas to write an essay. But in addition to that, we'll focus on vocabulary, or we'll focus on organization, or we'll focus on sentence fluency. So they have 1 or 2 additional things to focus on when they're revising. And then as they practice that, then you can add on 3 or 4 or 5 different categories that they're going to be graded on. Hopefully by the end of the year, you've got all the different categories of those 6 traits of writing as part of the rubric. Here are some sample rubrics I've used over the years. The one on the left uses that Institute for Excellence in Writing curriculum. You can see that they have something called dress ups, which are specific things to put into their sentences. They can underline them to show where they use them. This is nice for very beginning writers that don't know how to improve their sentences or even where to start. Something like what's on the left, this is what we would do towards the end of the year. I would not have given them all the dress ups and all the sentence openers on an early assignment. We would have started with maybe just strong verbs and quality adjectives and made sure those are in each of their paragraphs. The sentence openers, I would have just started with a couple of them and added on to it from there. You can see that we've got sentence openers that start with subjects, prepositions, ly adverbs, ing clauses. That's how it's taught in that curriculum instead of worrying about the specific titles for participles, for example. It just calls them ing clauses, and we practice what that means. And then they would number those so that they can see they don't have a whole bunch of ones in a row or a whole bunch of twos in a row, for instance. So that's what that curriculum is based on. The one on the right focuses on the 6 traits of writing curriculum as how it's being graded. So you can see ideas, word choice, sentence fluency, presentation, and conventions are each worth 20% of their grade. And we would have been going over each of those elements prior to writing this essay. So this, again, is also going to be a later essay that you might see in a school year because it works in 5 of those 6 elements. You would teach ideas and word choice and sentence fluency each individually, and then putting them all together in a longer essay towards the end of the year. And again, these handouts are in that Drive folder in case you want to adapt them to your needs. You can also see I've got length and formatting guidelines up there as well. That would just be based on whatever you want them to write that year or that essay. So here is how I break down the stages of writing an essay. I never just say, here's a prompt to write an essay. First, we would write either just the thesis statement or an outline or pre-writing map. Having just a thesis statement and their main points is a good place to start. Then they know what to turn in, what to develop that into for their essay. So making sure they just have good main points before they start writing. We don't want them to spend hours writing only for you to say, and that's not going to make a good thesis statement, or you can't use that as a main point. So making sure you approve or at least check over their thesis statement and main points before they get started helps them use their time better. Then they would write a first draft. For this one, I grade this almost as a completion grade. They simply need to be following the prompt and get their sentences down on paper. I tell them not to worry about things like sentence fluency and word choice. And I generally don't leave comments about sentence fluency or word choice or anything like that on their rough draft. The types of comments I would leave on their rough draft are simply whether it does or doesn't follow the guidelines, or whether it does or doesn't have the information they need in it. If they were supposed to provide 2 pieces of research and they don't have it, I would comment on that. But it's just the way for them to get their sentences down on paper. You don't want to spend a ton of time revising, working on giving them feedback on their rough draft, because that just is more grading for you, and they need to be working on that themselves. So the first draft is almost like a checkpoint, just to make sure that they're using their time well. So they've written all their sentences down, they're on track to be able to turn this in on time. The next thing they do is take that rough draft and revise it. Instead of me leaving a bunch of comments on everyone's first drafts, I give everyone a revision checklist. So they go through and see all the things they need to fix or make sure are done before their second draft. And I'm going to show you a few of those checklists in just a minute. That will allow you more time to work with them, less time spent grading outside of class. Instead of writing on every single student's essay, you forgot to do this, that's on their checklist. They should be able to figure out that they did not do something that was on their checklist. After they've revised it once, I have them get with partners. You may want to assign them partners so that they're not just working with their friends, but it's up to you depending on the class. Having students share that essay with their peers and getting some more feedback on it before turning in their second draft. The second draft is the one I spend more time giving them feedback on. This is actually the most time-consuming part for grading their essays, because this is the time I give them more specific feedback, like you need a better transition here. This word doesn't fit. It doesn't mean what you think it means. Maybe they used a thesaurus to substitute it in a stronger verb, and it doesn't have quite the same connotation as what they thought it did. So I give them lots of feedback on their second draft. Then they do another round of revising based on your comments, based on another checklist, and then they turn in their final essay. The final essay, you would make sure they have that rubric that they should have seen at the very beginning. They should not be surprised by anything that they get graded on with that. They would have already known that. And then I just provide general comments on that. You don't need to be putting in missing commas or a missed capitalization. They're not generally revising this. If you want them to revise it again, you could give them some feedback about that. But if it's the final essay, general comments with their grade is enough. And I always tell them they can come see me if they don't understand a grade. For instance, they lost a couple points on their spelling grade. They don't know where they misspelled something. They can just come ask me. So the checklists are how I manage to grade hundreds of essays in a reasonable amount of time. By not having to tell each individual student what they need to revise, I give them a checklist. They see what they've already done. It encourages them to figure out for themselves what they need to revise. They're not just waiting for someone to cross out a misspelled word and write the correct spelling for them, or someone to just put in a strong verb for them. It helps them see what should be in their essay and then do it for themselves. After they've gone through some of these basic checklists, then I give them feedback on it because they have already done the work to revise those very basic things like spelling and organization and things like that. So here are some sample checklists we have. There's one on the left, sort of based on our Thales Press curriculums, formatted like you may have seen in our textbooks. It's guided through different categories based on how it's being graded. So general formatting guidelines, do each of their paragraphs have 4 sentences in them? That's not something you should have to check for. That's something they would go through and make sure they have the right number of sentences in each paragraph. They've double spaced it. They don't use any first or second person if they're not supposed to. They've got a topic sentence at the start of each paragraph. So these are things that they can go through first before you read it and give them feedback on it. Then if they haven't done it or they haven't done it well, you can tell them how to improve and you can help them work on that. The one on the right is a handout based on that 6 Traits of Writing book. It comes out of their list of resources. So if you purchase that book, it comes with a whole CD of various resources. I've adapted this one a little bit, but it has them circle and do specific things in different color-coded markers or colored pencils, or I have them do it on PDF Expert and they just use their iPads to edit in different colors. And they go through different elements to revise that essay. Sometimes I give this to a peer and they circle those things on someone else's essay to get some practice in and to help their classmates out. It's up to you how you do it. Notice it has things like reading it backwards, one word at a time, so that they can catch those spelling errors they might not normally catch. So by editing very carefully through checklists, hopefully the essay that you give them feedback on is already a lot better and you don't have to spend as much time going over those basics with them. Some things to think about when you get to grading the second draft. The second draft, again, is the one I leave the most feedback on. So I've just got some basic things that are recommendations. Things you should do are indicate what words they use too much or are too vague. You can circle them and write vague, or simply circle them and write a question mark and let them come to see you if they don't know what that means. What you don't want to say is just improve your vocabulary. Leaving comments explaining an issue, like you have a lot of contractions in your essay or you used first person when you shouldn't, things like that. Don't fix the problems for them. If they don't know what your comment means, they're going to be reading through these in class time, so they can come ask you. If they don't know what first person means, hopefully they're going to come ask you and you can go over that with them. If they don't know what contractions are or they've forgotten, hopefully they'll come ask you. Instead of just adding in those, taking out those apostrophes and writing out the word for them, or crossing out I and putting a different word, that allows them to understand what they shouldn't be doing and fix it for themselves. Again, highlighting missing words or fragments or run-ons. If they have a lot of the same mistake, I would speak with them usually or leave them a comment at the end, like, you have a lot of fragments in your essay, come see me so we can go over how to fix those. So you don't want to just be fixing the problem for them and crossing out the misspelled word and writing the correct spelling. Instead, I would circle it so they catch that when they're editing. Using the Canvas app I know the Canvas app has some issues. This is one of the things it's actually really good at. If you use the teacher app, you can go onto their essays, use a stylus or Apple Pencil and write right on those essays that they've submitted. It also has a rubric feature. You can just tap on the different categories throughout while you're reading their essay. It's got two different sides to it. You can see their essay on one side, the rubric on the other, and it's very easy to annotate on there, just like you're writing on paper. You can have students turn things in on paper, but not all of them have access to a printer, or the printer may not be working. They're low on ink. You end up with a hot pink essay because they didn't have any black left. It helps save paper as well. So this is one of the great uses of the Canvas app on your iPads, is being able to edit those essays and give them feedback, just like you were writing with a red pen on paper. You can also vary the colors very easily. You can highlight different words in different colors. Maybe you told them you highlighted all their misspelled words in yellow, and then they're able to see that. And then using that rubric feature allows you to quickly click through things without having to write it out. For example, I often, for their second draft, put things like word choice on their second draft, and different boxes indicate different errors. So maybe they used first person, or they used contractions, and instead of having to write a whole comment about it, you can just click it on the rubric, and then they'll be able to see that when you finished grading it and see what they need to fix. So it's a good time saver. And it also means they don't have to keep track of anything outside their iPad. They can see all those annotations and comments anytime they need them. After they have turned in and you have graded and returned to them that second draft, have them read over those comments in class. We usually, right after I finish grading them all, we have a writing workshop day where they first read through all my comments, then they look through the rubric, and then they ask me questions. Make sure you are circulating during that time. Students just, for some reason, don't like to ask questions if you're sitting at your desk. Maybe they don't want to interrupt you. They feel awkward standing up when everyone else is seated in their seats. But if you're walking around, you'll suddenly see that everyone's got a question. So making sure that you're walking around during that time to help them improve, to help them with any questions they have. Maybe you put down that they used a lot of fragments and they don't know how to fix it. That's the time you can give them concrete, specific help. You can help them fix things. On their drafts, I don't like to write out corrections. Like they have a misspelled word, don't just cross it off and write the correct spelling for them. That doesn't help them learn. Instead, circle it. If it is class time and they're like, I've tried to find this word in the dictionary or online, I can't figure out how to spell it correctly, then go ahead and tell them how to spell it. Or you told them they used first person, they have a sentence with first person in it, they don't know how to change the sentence so it doesn't have first person in it, help them do that. Just don't fix it for them when you're grading their rough draft. It takes more time from you, and all they're doing is taking the edits you made and putting them into their essay. So it's not really their work. So using a lot of class time to help them revise. I rarely have them do those revisions at home because that's what the teacher's there to help them with. It's to help them improve their writing. So having them do that in class allows you to go around and help each student. You can also pair them up with students, or have some students who are excellent writers and maybe already finished their essay or didn't need much feedback on their rough draft, be helping their classmates as well. Students like to ask their classmates sometimes questions before their teacher if they're feeling a little shy that day. So making sure you're circulating and answering all those questions really helps them improve. And then I always give them one final checklist, make sure they've done everything, done the best they can on all those elements before they turn in. Here are some different resources that I like to use, the ones I've mentioned throughout this presentation. Write Like This is a book that just has, in fact, I've got it right here. It's just a book of model essays. Now, a lot of them are more advanced, I think, than middle schoolers need to write in, but it gives them good things to model. So they don't necessarily need to write as well as in here. But the idea is to give them excellent essays so they know what they're trying to do. They know what their goal is. And just reading good essays is going to help them improve. On Writing Well is an article that can also give you some good insight. And these are some other useful resources, the traits of writing I mentioned, all the things under curriculum I've mentioned today. And we've got our Thales Press staff emails up there as well in case you have any questions. Now, I know that was a lot of information, so I'm going to see if I can figure out how to work this Q&A and see about any more particular questions people have. Again, all these resources, including the PowerPoint, is all available in that Google Drive folder that Winston posted in the chat. Does anyone have any questions they have for me today? I think you should be able to either reply in the chat or in the Q&A section. Ooh, I didn't mean to raise my own hand. Okay, well, it doesn't look like anyone has any questions today. If you're watching this video later, feel free to email me. This is going to be posted to anyone who signed up for the webinar, so you'll be able to access this at any time. Feel free to send me any particular questions at any time, and I will be happy to get back to you, give you any feedback. If you have more specific questions regarding a particular essay assignment or a prompt, or you just want some ideas about what to give them as good assignments or any feedback you'd like, I'm happy to help with those. So feel free to email me at any time, and I would love to help you. Hope everyone has a great rest of your day.